Hi, this is Vanessa Joy for Adorama TV, and today we're doing a snowy shoot in the freezing cold, so it's going to be fast, but it's going to be fun. I'm using my 135-2.0 with the adapter with the control ring on my R5, and we're not going to really hesitate anymore because it's really cold. Now, I definitely did not have to do anything when it came to posing. Nikki is a professional model, so she just did her thing and knew how to do it as fast as possible because it was absolutely freezing for both of us. I didn't change my exposure too much to begin with. We were at ISO 320, aperture 2, so I can get that nice golden background and a shutter of 500. But then halfway through the shoot, I wanted to try exposing a little bit more for the highlights. So I ended up boosting my shutter speed to 1250 to get sort of a mid-range. And then I went even darker, like you see here, by going all the way up to 6400 on my shutter. You're going to see in editing why I did this, and I thought it would be fun to experiment with different exposures and different means of thinking on how to get a balanced exposure with natural light without flash. All of these images that you are seeing are straight out of camera, but we'll get into editing them in just a minute. This definitely was the perfect time of day for that absolutely gorgeous soft backlight, lighting Nikki's hair, and then everything in front, all of the snow, the white sidewalk, the wet sidewalk, just added to the reflection that was going up in her face. So to be honest, this was probably one of the most ideal photo sessions I've ever had. So it was the perfect time to play with balancing and messing around with the exposures like you see. Okay, we are really going to get into editing on this one because I did some very intentional shooting just because I wanted to show you the editing process, and there's a few different schools of thought. Now for the normal photos first, I messed around and ended up using a preset that I don't normally use, the light and airy preset. It's just a fun one, and you know, this one just had that type of feel. Ultimately though, the rest of them I did go for the Joyfully Simple preset. I wanted to just have lighter shadows, really brighten everything up, very whimsical, snowy feel. And then I wanted a lot of the other colors to not be as much of a distraction. So I really wanted to just see a little bit of the greens. I wanted to see the blues in her jeans and her shirt. And now we're going to get into just copying and pasting them to the rest of the photos before we get into those dark photos where you were probably thinking, why is Vanessa taking those photos? Well, there's a few schools of thought when it comes to shooting natural light, not with a flash, and deciding where to set your exposure. So I took 3 different photos. One was exposing for the skin tone, one was exposing for the highlights in the background completely, so none of them were overblown. And then one was sort of in the middle of the two of them, trying not to get too dark in the shadows on the face and making sure that the highlights weren't too blown out, but they ultimately were a little bit. So a few things that you can do here. You could go to that first photo where it's kind of in the middle, brighten it up a little bit, and then take your local adjustment brushes, brighten up the face a little bit more, and lower the highlights in the sky. That's option 1. Here we have the one that's really underexposed on the skin, so we're brightening that up on the bottom, and for the most part leaving what's on top. And you know, we have the highlights exposed on the top here, except it looks a little bit funny in the shadows. So I'm going to use my local adjustment brush really just to lighten the shadows as well as darken the highlights up top so that it somewhat matches. And then of course you have the one where we just exposed for the skin tone, and that one we really just tried to bring back the highlights. So here's all 3 of them. The left one is the one that we exposed for the skin and completely blew out the top. The middle is that middle range one, and the one on the right is the one that was completely underexposed. Now there's lots of discussion on that, but I did want to show you 3 ways to edit it when working with highlights in the back. Now, one thing you do have to be concerned about in the picture all the way on the right is when you bring up shadows, there is a significant amount of noise that comes along with that. So again, this is only if you're shooting natural light. These are some of the solutions. to the problem of an overexposed background that you have. Just a couple of different methods that you can use to get a balanced exposure and not blow out too much of the detail in the background. Anyway, here are all of my favorite photos from this shoot, now edited so that they match, and this is definitely the feel that I was going for. Really loved it. And let me just narrow it down to my absolute favorites, because then I will go in and do a little bit of skin retouching. Nothing crazy, just a little bit of skin smoothing on them. So I have all of my favorite photos here, and I'm just going to do a little bit of skin retouching, probably just on this one, honestly. And you can see as I zoomed in, notice all of the noise that was in the shadows on this one, because we did bring up the lower exposure that we had on her face as opposed to a balanced one. So something definitely to take into consideration if you're going to use the expose for the highlights method. And you can see the before and after, and the work that I did. That was actually only the mid exposure one, but we did have to bring up the face quite a bit, so you can see where the noise was introduced there. Here's a bunch of before and afters for you, and of course my final favorite 4 photos. If you want some posing inspiration, definitely download the free posing guide in the link below. It's good for individuals, couples, and groups. I hope you like this snowy day photo shoot. Make sure you hit subscribe, ring the bell, eat your hair, and I will see you next time, hopefully when it's warmer. Bye.